A lot about traffic today. Martin made a great point about people coming from the east, not the west, to IKEA. Just coming down from that direction today, about 6 o'clock, traffic was backed up to sort of the Holmbush. That's the kind of time people are going to go to IKEA. These many, many thousands of people will be going to IKEA. It's just not going to work. My second point is about exactly what the benefits to the people of Lancing and Shoreham are. Yes, we've heard a lot about that. We heard from Martin that the IKEA was apparently necessary for viability. Well, I think that indicates that perhaps they overpaid for the land. We shouldn't be sacrificing our quality of life in this area just because they've overpaid for their land. And my final point is one that hasn't really been raised very much yet. We heard about green gaps and how they're falling away in planning policy. But what we haven't heard about tonight is the impact on the setting of the South Downs National Park and the setting of Lancing College as a historic building. And I think that impact is going to be absolutely diabolical, and we will lose those heritage assets forever.
Can we take this corner and gentleman's been waiting, the lady next, and then the gentleman there will take it. Thank you for those points. Sir.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Gordon Eaton. I'm a local resident and ageing cynic. I'm delighted that Martin has consulted with and taken advice from all these wonderful, clever bodies. Sadly, when I hear the words expert and consultant, my hackles go up. From my own personal experience dealing with some of these bodies and observation over the years of some of the disastrous traffic planning decisions which are made, I wonder, there's one body that whose voice doesn't seem to be getting heard here. Good old public opinion. Yeah. You know, Joe Public.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? Hello, everybody. My point is about the ADA plan that was done 4 years ago. James, were you part of that plan? James, are you part of the ADA plan? Brilliant. Okay. What I'm trying to understand is, I can imagine it's been done to improve and regenerate the area economically and as a long-term a sensible development thing, which I commend you for. What I question is IKEA the best solution for that, as Tim has raised, and has Martin really genuinely looked at other alternatives? And the councillors here in the room, all of you people who are employed by us to serve our community, I ask from the bottom of my heart to genuinely consider if IKEA is going to provide that need, or is it just providing land value? And there is a clear distinction, and we have to long-term consider that. And James, I believe the decision rests in your hands. You are the man. Please, for the sake of our children, the fact that we live here and love it, please consider that this is the right decision for this community. Shoreham is a community. I am so blessed to live in Shoreham as a community, and I am so worried long term what will happen if we don't do our bit now to say, is IKEA really the right solution, and should Martin be investigating? I don't want to say John Lewis is another answer, but is there another? And it's not just because it's a social democrat. I don't know what the answer is, but please consider all the options.
Other good department stores are available.
Well, I'm Joe Public, and I'm a Joe. But my point really was very similar about the fact that we know the football club wants to make money from this. The decision lies with the planning authority here. The Coastal Capital plan is about upskilling the jobs. We've also got the Coastal Community Plan, which is about raising the attainment level for the young people in the area. And actually what IKEA development is doing is actually having low-paid jobs, keeping our level down. Our average salaries are way below the southeast area, and that just adds to it. So one of my questions is, what was the employment plan connected to the local development plan? So what was supposed to be it? We've got an engineering centre at the airport. Manufacturing is supposed to be a key area. Engineering. All these areas which would bring in highly skilled jobs, better development for Lancing. Instead, the proposal is to make money for the football club and keep low-skilled jobs. And I would hope that the local authority will address that.
Thank you for those points. Just so you don't know, that Coaster Capital is the local LEP, the local economic partnership, which is responsible for investing in skills and transport infrastructure and others in the area between Gatwick and the coastal strip here. So they obviously have an interest in that. Thank you for those points. Sir.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Chris Drew. I'm on the consultative committee for the Shoreham Airport, and I'm also chairman of the West Beach Residents Association. And tonight, publicly, I'd like to ask Mr. Lawton, as our MP, I'm sure he'll agree he's very privileged for that position, and in that position, is he tonight going to support Shoreham Airport fully? Yes or no?
Of course, yeah.
Taking that into account then, can Mr. Lawton please explain to me why he is not part of the all-party parliamentary group on general aviation? Because general aviation in the UK employs over 40,000 people, generates over 3 billion to the economy. Shoreham Airport over the last 10 years has gone through some very questionable and unprofessional dealings, none of which have ever been called into question by our MP. And I'd like him tonight to publicly say, since he's now committed to Shoreham Airport, that one, he will join the all-party parliamentary group on aviation, and he will take their action plan on their 4 specific points on VAT, on fuel, avgas, and STEM training, because it's also backed by British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, BAE Systems and Rolls-Royce. And if he's willing to sign up, I have the list of MPs he needs to write to support all those issues, which will all help Shoreham Airport's future. And yeah, I'd just like his commitment tonight to join.
I already have.
Thank you very much. So that's actually fairly new, and since the chairman of the all-party group has already come out publicly, which is unfortunately not fully reported in the Herald because Mr. Perry's answer got more print than his, they've already come out fully opposing IKEA and the NMF. That was the name you were looking for, the all-party parliamentary group, no?
No, I was going to ask Tim if he was aware of a meeting of the Policy, Resources and Growth Committee, Brighton and Hove City Council.
You sent me that, I wasn't, and I'll come back to that.
Okay, and also there was a Parliament media briefing on Shoreham Airport yesterday. Could you please advise us how that went as well?
Okay, and I'll take the point here, then I'll answer, and then you, James. The lady.
Just a question. This doesn't. Else it doesn't. Just a question about Joe Public and also the decision-making process. Is it right that Brighton and Hove Albion can ask their supporters who are county-wide to influence a planning decision that should be made by Ada District Council? If it is all right, how are the council going to deal with people who support the proposal who are from outside the area? Yes.
Right, let me answer those 2 points and I'll come to James. And I've raised this as well. Clearly Brighton and Hove has got quite a large customer base, a large number of season ticket holders who live in the area and beyond the area, various websites and blogs that they use. A few weeks ago, the Herald, on its website, did a simple poll about whether you supported or not the new Monks Farm development. Within about 48 hours, over 1,700 people had voted in that poll, and magically 80% of them voted that they were in favour of New Monks Farm. Now, I don't think 1,700 people read the Herald in the space of 24 hours, let alone go onto their website and vote. There was an operation there, and if you look on their blogs and websites as well, they have been encouraging their supporters to write in with their letters of support. Now, I hope that that will be taken into account by the planning committee, because clearly those are people, in most cases, not all, because some of them will live locally, where they have other vested interests that aren't necessarily the best interests of the community in which that facility is going to be built. And I think that is a problem. They are allowed to, anybody from John O'Groats to Penzance can put in a submission on the planning committee, but I just hope people will be aware to that. But the way to counter all of that is for all of you, the other 20,000 odd people who live in Lancing and beyond, to put in your letters of concern as part of the official consultation. We put out this survey, and I will put in the results from that survey, which have so far, the ones I've seen, been overwhelmingly negative on most of the proposals. We will put that in as part of the consultation as well. The point about...
Can I just add to that? Can James answer that question as part
yeah,
of
sure.
the panel?
Okay, James, we'll come back to that as well. Just on this aviation group, there are over 800 all-party parliamentary groups of everything from plumbing to Morris dancing. Most of them are a waste of time. A new one on aviation was set up just before the summer, which I wasn't aware of. I've had conversations with the chairman of it, who's an MP called Grant Shapps, and I've subsequently spoken to the airport, and I've subsequently written to the Department of Transport about getting Shoreham Airport recognised as a safeguarded airport, because I want Shoreham Airport to remain as an airport. It is still owned by the two councils, Brighton and by Worthing Council, as part of the lease, which has recently been changed, which I wasn't aware of, but it still has to remain as an airport, and they remain as the freeholders. So it cannot be closed down, and I don't want anything to be done that could impact on the viability of that airport. And clearly there is a concern, and Peter Villehide spoke to the other day, needs to put in submissions about the impact potentially on the airport of having 600 houses and everything else closer to that airport and the landing strip and everything. That is a valid concern, and I'd like James just to comment on how big a weighting that may have in the whole consideration. So I'm supportive of that, and I will do nothing that would jeopardise the future of Shoreham Airport, because it is part of the local community.
But then, 10 years ago, when the council sold the airport for the pound on the 99-year lease, the company they sold it to, after several years, split the airport into two, taking all the income from the industrial units, which I think last year the figure was over £1 million. They split it into two companies, airport and the industrial. They then, a couple of years later, didn't have the money for the terminal repairs, etc., which they had to do under the original thing. They then went into liquidation. But their other parent company has walked away with the £1 million income from an industrial estate. So now they're looking at building on the north side of the airport to try and bail out the airport again. And then what's going to happen if that gets sold?
I mean, James, if that's comment on a bit about, I don't want to go into huge detail about Judsey Airport, because a lot of other people want to come in. The bottom line is, in the lease of the people operating the airport, it has to stay as an airport. The people running the airport, Flying Time Aviation, their business is purely from flying planes and trading, and they want to expand their activities there to do that. That is airport-related activity. That is what it must stay as. That's what it needs to stay as. And absolutely, that's what I will support it to stay as for local councils. I'm sure.
Why don't the council take back the £1 million income from the units?
Don't know. Let's have a separate meeting on that if people are really concerned about that. Right, I'm going to ask James to respond to some of those points, and then I'll come back to the back of the hall. James, do you want to take that whilst it's still working?
Good evening, everyone. I suppose I should start by saying the decision doesn't just sit with me. I am a planner of over 30 years, and I'm currently the head of planning for Ada and Worthing. And I sat through and was leading the local plan with the government-appointed inspector earlier this year. So the decision will ultimately be made by the planning committee. It is a quasi-judicial process. The planning committee have to consider the application on its planning merits, and as a council, as a planning committee, we're duty-bound as a statutory requirement to determine that application. So we have to make a decision ultimately on the application, whether to approve or refuse. There are a number of points, and I've been scribbling away, and I won't be able to cover everything, but I'll just try and deal with a number of matters that have been raised. One of the questions was around how you can elicit either support or objection to any planning application. And certainly, having been a planner for a number of years, I've seen all sorts of ways of trying to elicit support from neighbours or objections from neighbours and from further afield. And certainly over the times I've dealt with very major planning applications with 2,000 to 3,000 objections. I would say it's not a numbers game. Whatever the number of objections or support, they have to be based on valid planning reasons, and that's what the planning committee will have to consider. One of the things that we can do, and I certainly remember in dealing with a small-scale application in Worthing for a 15-storey tower on Worthing seafront, there was concerns that the applicant might be getting support from further afield. So one thing that we can do, and we did actually on that application, was to try and track where we were getting letters of either support or objection. So I can, through the systems we have, when we get a letter in, we can trace where the letters are coming from to try and have an understanding of where the support or objection is coming from.
None of them from Goring.
Don't bring Goring.
No, don't bring Goring.
So in terms of the planning application, my job and as a professional officer of the council is to present the application in a fair and balanced way and trying to grapple with all these huge technical issues that have been raised, transport, resale, drainage and the like. In terms of whatever decision the planning committee make, I said they have to make it on valid planning grounds. The basis for planning is still very much on a plan-led system. So the starting point for dealing with any planning permission or planning application is it in accordance with the development plan? Now at the moment we don't have an up-to-date development plan. The local plan is dated 1996. So we are going through this process of a new local plan, which we mentioned earlier, I mentioned earlier, went to examination. The planning inspector, because at the time of the examination in public in February, there was also the public consultation exercise on this IKEA proposal. Now the planning inspector wasn't interested in hearing any arguments about the IKEA proposal. All the planning inspector was asked to consider was whether the council has got the right balance between trying to meet future housing and employment needs, community, sports facilities and everything else, balancing that with the environment. So the local plan does, as Martin Perry indicated, and I'm not here in any way to defend the application because my job is to impartially deal with it and make a recommendation to the planning committee in due course. For the planning inspector was just asked to consider the allocation of 600 houses and 10,000 square metres of employment generating floor space. That was a term that was used in the local plan. Now, during those 2 weeks, the council was under intense pressure from other site promoters who were annoyed and arguing very strongly that their sites should also be included. New Salts Farm, Old Salts Farm, Mill Road, Stenning Road. There were 4 or 5 other sites that weren't allocated. And the inspector, because we have to, as a planning authority, try to meet our future housing needs, was considering those representations. I don't know what the planning inspector is ultimately going to say because we're still waiting for his report. But what I can say is that the inspector, in his initial findings, said that the plan was unsound unless the council goes out and reconsults the public on amendments to that plan, and which we've done over the summer. The key amendments that the inspector picked up on, because of our significant housing problem and shortage, that we shouldn't say up to 600 dwellings or up to 10,000 square metres. The inspector said it should be a minimum of 600 dwellings and a minimum of 10,000 square metres. So the inspector has directed us as a local authority to go out, and that's what we've reconsulted on, that we change not too many words, but quite a big difference in terms of taking out up to and putting in minimum. Now, a number of people have made representations to that further change to the local plan. including all the people that weren't allocated land. I think from Hyde Housing we had a 300-page submission that the inspector is currently going through, saying the council has not done enough to allocate enough land. So just to give you, I'm sorry about this, a few facts, but to meet ADA's future housing requirements, we're meant to be delivering 5,500 dwellings. We said to the inspector that that's just not possible. So the most that we could produce, deliver through the allocated sites would be 3,500. The inspector has accepted that, we hope, but has suggested that because of our shortfall, we should be looking at a minimum. Now, that's on the local plan. In terms of this planning application, we've made it clear to the developers that we're not going to consider this until we know exactly what the local plan inspector is going to say on the plan. So we anticipate that we will get the final report. It's going to run to hundreds of pages probably, I don't know, and we will have to go through it, and there will be a process of considering that, and then the council, in considering the inspector's report, then has to go through a formal process of getting full council to agree to publish the local plan as the new adopted plan for the area. So until that's happened, we're not going to take this to planning committee. But I mentioned we have a duty to determine the planning application. So, and because of the very technical matters about air quality, about retail issues, drainage, we have as a council sought to verify some of the statements of the applicant. So the applicant is saying that there is a viability issue and that we need this IKEA to deliver the roundabout, the drainage strategy, the 600 houses, and so on. So we have engaged a number of consultants to review, and sorry it's more consultants, but you know, in terms of trying to deal with it, we have to assess it, and it's very technical, some of the arguments have been presented, certainly the highway issues. So I am in the process of having a team of consultants to advise the council. They will be appointed by the council, they will be independent of the applicant, and if the applicant says there's no highway impact, we have to assess that. I'm very sceptical as a planning officer. I've been around enough to sort of take everything I hear with a pinch of salt, so we will have to verify everything. We will also verify the issues around viability. The only thing I'd say about viability, though, is that in considering the plan, our own consultants on the plan did question the viability of the New Monks Farm development and did say that if we were considering to have what's known community infrastructure levy to try and extract more funding from the developer, we wouldn't be able to do it. So our own viability consultants on the plan suggested that the development would not afford what's known as community infrastructure, which is meant to be replacing 106 agreement. The 106 agreement is a legal agreement between the applicant and the council to secure some of the improvements to the area and to mitigate the impact of the development.
Can you explain that last little bit again? That's very key. No, I know the 106, but the change you mentioned that they're not obligated.
Can you repeat the question so it wasn't heard?
James, I'm hoping you can clarify that very key point that the change that Brighton and Hove won't be obligated to increase their what was previously 106 and is now called something different?
Sorry. So in relation to currently, because of the advice of our viability consultants, the council has recently decided that we won't be introducing community infrastructure levy. So for this development, it would be what is perhaps the traditional way of dealing with it. It's a legal agreement between the council and the applicant. Were planning permission to be granted, it would be then subject to a legal agreement to secure the appropriate mitigation for the development. I say if the council, that's part of that process. So in terms of when the planning committee consider it, it would be to approve or refuse. The council has to consider, because there's been a change in the Localism Act in 2011, we do have to consider viability, and we do have to consider matters such as New Homes Bonus, which is an incentive to local authorities to build new housing. I mean, in this instance, we have to, because there's an allocated plan that suggests and that allocates the site for 600 dwellings. So whatever happens here, it's a question of whether what is being proposed is appropriate given the local plan situation, and whether it's appropriate to allow a significant increase over the 10,000 square metres that the local plan considered.
Can we just take the airport question? What impact the airport?
So, Ada has been working on this local plan for some years, and as part of that process, we undertake a number of formal consultations on the plan. That has included the Civil Aviation Authority and the airport itself. At no point, I should have to say that I'm aware, has there been an issue that the site should not be allocated for 600 dwellings or commercial floor space. And equally, there have not been, as far as I'm aware, any objections. Certainly the local plan inspector hasn't considered any objections to the principle of development within the airport or on New Monks Farm. So, but what I would say, now that we've got a planning application, is that one of the key consultees for the planning application is the Civil Aviation Authority and the airport, and we wait to see on that. And again, it's a question of dealing with all the technical matters and the technical responses we get from a whole range of bodies.
Okay, I'm going to take a small question. I just want to address the point which I was asked from the back by Councillor Everly, also a local resident. I have always expressed my severe reservations about this scheme on that site, and a few years ago when we were talking about 600 houses, I thought that was an overdevelopment. I think adding IKEA to it now as well completely kills any viability of that whole scheme. That is my view, and that's the basis on which I've tried to be neutral in chairing this meeting, but that's the representations I have made and will make to the planning process. The decision has nothing to do with me. I'm not a member of the planning committee, and the members of the planning committee of all parties have to follow planning law. This is not a political thing, and I don't know about your party, Councillor Everly, but you cannot mandate councillors in the way that they vote. I know that Lancing Parish Council considered this application as a statutory consultee, and all councillors of every party, including the Conservative councillors, were there, voted against this application. Those councillors have got a difficult decision to make, because as you've heard from James, and it was a very helpful roundup of what the planning situation is, they are under pressure to provide additional houses, which we know we need. And of course, if they object to it outright, the developer has the right to go to appeal, and then that decision is taken completely out of our hands, and they think they've got a strong case. The only thing I would point out is that identifying houses is in there, but identifying 10,000 square foot metres, whatever it is, of floor space does not inevitably mean IKEA. And I just think IKEA is a thing that absolutely kills it on so many grounds, and I think there would be some acceptance for, as several people have mentioned as well as me, some other light businesses, certainly that involved higher skilled jobs and not squillions of customers driving to get their flat pack furniture, which we're told there's going to be public transport. I don't know about you, but I've not seen many people coming out of IKEA in Croydon with a flat pack wardrobe under their arm getting on the bus, so it's all going to be in cars. Right, I want to go right to the back. We've got the head of Lancing College here, who's obviously severely impacted by this. Dominic, have you got a microphone near you? Yeah, coming over. Right.
Hi. I just wanted to be clear that the college feels very much part of the community. I mean, it's called Lancing College for a good reason. We employ hundreds of local residents. We have hundreds of people living on site, and that's not including all the children who come on a daily basis. Hundreds of them live there. There's the pollution issues, there's the fact that we are in the national park. There is the fact that the road plans as we have seen them, which were at a different stage and an agreed different stage not that long ago, and have been altered by the developer's plans do not join up with, in any case, the deeply flawed Highways England plans for the rest of the A27. And it's our very